The stars looked different from the bridge of the Harmony's edge. Captain Veltar stretched his long blue arms and checked the navigation display again. His ship had been traveling through hyperspace for 6 days, searching for new worlds to add to the galactic survey records. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual," said Science Officer Krina from her station. Her 4 eyes focused on the scanning equipment. "There's a star system ahead with signs of advanced technology." Veltar moved to look at her screen. The readings showed metal structures and energy signatures coming from the 4th planet. This was strange. According to their maps, this area of space was empty. No known species lived here. "Could it be ruins from an old civilization?" Veltar asked. "No, sir. These readings are too strong. Someone is definitely living there right now." Veltar felt excited. Finding a new intelligent species was rare and important. It could mean a new member for the Galactic Council. Most species they found were still using simple tools or had just discovered fire. A spacefaring civilization was a special discovery. "Take us out of hyperspace. Set course for the 4th planet," he ordered. The ship dropped back into normal space with a soft hum. Through the main window, they could see a blue and green world that looked very much like Earth. Cities dotted the surface, and ships moved between the planet and several space stations. "Captain, we're being scanned," reported Communications Officer Zexton. "They know we're here." Before Veltar could respond, his communication system activated. A face appeared on the screen. It was a being with pale skin, dark hair, and only 2 eyes. The alien looked calm and friendly. "Greetings, unknown vessel. This is Administrator Jinho of Baekdu Prime. Welcome to our system. We come in peace." Veltar was surprised. Most new species were afraid when they first met galactic ships. This one seemed almost like he had been expecting them. "Greetings, Administrator Jinho. I am Captain Veltar of the Galactic Survey. We represent the peaceful nations of the galaxy. We did not know your people existed." Jinho smiled. "We have been isolated for a long time. We would be honored to meet with representatives of the galaxy. Would you like to visit our planet?" This was going better than Veltar had hoped. Usually, first contact took months of careful communication. These beings seemed ready to talk right away. "We would be very interested in visiting. May we bring a small diplomatic team?" "Of course. We will send coordinates for a landing site near our capital city. We look forward to meeting you in person." 2 hours later, Veltar and his team landed their shuttle in a large field outside a beautiful city. The buildings were made of white stone and metal, designed in curved shapes that looked both artistic and practical. Gardens and parks filled the spaces between buildings. Everything looked clean and peaceful. A group of humans waited for them at the landing site. Administrator Jinho stepped forward. He was a tall man with kind eyes and graying hair. Behind him stood several others, including a woman with short black hair who introduced herself as Mira, the town planner. "Welcome to Baekdu Prime," Jinho said, shaking hands with each alien visitor. "We are so pleased to finally meet other intelligent life." As they walked toward the city, Veltar asked questions about the human colony. Jinho explained that their people had arrived here over 200 years ago when their ship had problems during a long journey. They had made this world their new home. "We lost contact with our original homeworld long ago," Jinho said. "We have been wondering if we were alone in the universe." The humans seemed like a gentle, peaceful people. They showed the aliens through their city, pointing out schools, hospitals, and cultural centers. Children played in the parks, while adults worked in gardens and workshops. Everyone they met was friendly and curious about the visitors. Mira explained how they organized their society. "We believe in working together for the good of everyone. Each person contributes what they can. We grow our own food, make our own tools, and take care of each other." During their tour, they visited a large building that Jinho called the Community Center. Inside, humans of all ages were engaged in various activities. Some worked on art projects while others studied at computers. In one room, young people practiced what looked like a complex dance with precise movements. Physical fitness is important. To us, explained a man named Deho, who was introduced as the head of agricultural development. We believe a healthy body supports a healthy mind. Veltar noticed that many of the humans seemed very fit and alert. Even the older ones moved, with confidence and strength. The children were polite, but watched the aliens with sharp, intelligent eyes. As evening approached, Jinho invited the aliens to stay for dinner. They gathered in a large hall where hundreds of humans had come to meet the visitors. The food was simple but delicious, made from crops grown on the planet. During the meal, Veltar spoke with many colonists. They all seemed well-educated and thoughtful. They asked careful questions about galactic civilization, trade, and technology. Their questions showed they understood complex ideas about space travel, energy systems, and planetary management. Your people seem very advanced for a lost colony, Veltar observed to Jinho. Jinho smiled. We have had 200 years to learn and grow. When you are isolated, you must become self-sufficient. We have worked hard to build a good life here. After dinner, the aliens were given comfortable rooms in a guest house. As Veltar prepared for sleep, he felt pleased with the day. These humans would make excellent members of the galactic community. They were peaceful, intelligent, and eager to learn. But something small bothered him. During their tour, he had noticed things that seemed unusual for a simple farming colony. The communication equipment was more advanced than expected. The power systems were larger than needed for the population. And some of the buildings had thick walls that looked more like fortifications than homes. Still, he dismissed these thoughts. The humans had been isolated for centuries. They probably just built things stronger than necessary to last longer. Tomorrow he would continue learning about their society and prepare his report for the Galactic Council. Veltar fell asleep thinking about how wonderful it would be to welcome a new peaceful species into the galaxy. He had no idea that while he slept, sensors hidden throughout the colony were scanning his ship, analyzing its weapons, shields, and weak points. The humans were learning everything they could about their visitors, just as they had been trained to do for the past 200 years. The morning sun cast long shadows across Bayektu Prime as Captain Veltar met with Administrator Jinho in the colony's main administrative building. The office was simple but comfortable, with large windows that looked out over the peaceful city. "Captain, I hope you slept well," Jinho said, offering a cup of hot tea made from local plants. "Today, we would like to show you more of our colony. My people are excited to learn what it might mean to join the galactic community." Veltar accepted the tea gratefully. "Before we can recommend your world for membership in the Galactic Council, we need to complete a formal inspection. This helps us understand your society and what assistance you might need." "Of course. We have nothing to hide," Jinho replied with a warm smile. "Where would you like to begin?" They started at the edge of the city, where vast fields of crops stretched toward distant hills. A woman named Huna met them at what she called the education center. She was a teacher who worked with the colony's children. "Learning is very important to us," Huna explained as she led them through classrooms filled with eager students. "We teach our children mathematics, science, history, and practical skills." Veltar watched a group of 10-year-olds working with what appeared to be advanced mathematical equations. The problems looked more complex than what most species taught at that age. "These calculations seem quite advanced," he observed. Huna laughed. "Children here learn quickly. We find that understanding trajectories and angles helps them in many areas of life. Farming, construction, even games require good mathematical thinking." In another classroom, teenagers worked with detailed star charts and navigation equipment. When Veltar asked about this, a young boy named Taewon eagerly explained their astronomy program. "We study all the stars we can see," Taewon said. "We want to know what's out there. How fast can your ship travel?" What kind of fuel does it use? Do you have defensive systems in case you meet hostile aliens? The questions seemed innocent enough, though Veltar noticed they were quite specific about technical details. Huna quickly guided them to the next area, explaining that children were naturally curious about space travel. From the education center, they visited the agricultural zones. A man named Junho showed them around the farms. The fields were arranged in precise geometric patterns that extended for kilometers. Straight lines of crops alternated with what Junho called irrigation channels. "We've learned to be very efficient with our farming," Junho explained. "Every meter of land must be used carefully. The channels help water reach all areas quickly." Veltar noticed that the channels were deeper than necessary for water flow. They also seemed to connect in a network that covered the entire agricultural area. Some of the ditches had metal frameworks that Junho said were for supporting climbing. "Plants? Your organization is impressive," Veltar commented. "These patterns must have taken years to plan." "We think long-term here," Junho replied. "Every generation builds on what the last one created. We've had time to perfect our methods." Near the farms stood large cylindrical buildings that Junho identified as grain storage silos. They were much larger than what the colony's population seemed to require. When Veltar mentioned this, Junho explained that they always kept several years of food in reserve. "We learned to be prepared for bad weather or crop failures," he said. "It's better to have too much than too little." The silos were built with thick metal walls and had complex mechanical systems on top. Junho said these were for moving grain, but the equipment looked more sophisticated than simple farming tools. Their next stop was the community center they had visited the day before. Today, a woman named Subin gave them a detailed tour. She was the colony's historian and keeper of records. "We maintain detailed histories of everything," Subin explained as she showed them rooms filled with computers and files. "Our experiences, our discoveries, our methods, everything is recorded for future generations." Veltar saw that their record-keeping system was remarkably advanced. The computers displayed complex databases with information about weather patterns, resource management, and population statistics, but he also noticed files with titles like Defensive Strategies and Emergency Protocols. When he asked about these, Subin explained that any isolated colony needed to plan for emergencies. "We study historical examples of how other civilizations dealt with challenges," she said. "Natural disasters, resource shortages, even conflicts between groups. We learn from the past to prepare for the future." The afternoon was spent visiting manufacturing areas where colonists produced tools, clothing, and equipment. The workshops were clean and efficient, with machinery that seemed quite advanced for a simple farming colony. Workers demonstrated how they made everything from farming tools to communication devices. Deho, the head of agricultural development, showed them a facility where they processed raw materials. The building was large and heavily built, with thick walls and multiple security doors. "We extract metals and other materials from local sources," Deho explained. "This allows us to maintain our equipment and build new tools as needed." The extraction and processing equipment was more complex than Veltar expected. Some of the machinery looked like it could produce very precise metal components. When he asked about this, Deho said they had learned to make high-quality tools that would last longer. "When you're isolated, everything you make must be built to last," he said. "We can't afford to have important equipment break down." As the day ended, they visited a residential area where families lived in comfortable homes surrounded by gardens. The houses were well built with thick walls and deep foundations. Many had underground storage areas that residents said they used for food preservation. A young woman named Subin invited them into her home for evening tea. Her house was cozy and welcoming, filled with artwork and books. But Veltar noticed that the windows were small and positioned high on the walls. The doors were heavy and had multiple locks. "We build our homes to be safe and comfortable," Subin explained when he commented on the construction. The weather here can be harsh sometimes, so we make sure our buildings are strong." During tea, Subin's neighbors joined them. They were friendly people who asked many questions about galactic civilization. They wanted to know about trade, communication systems, and how different species resolved conflicts. "Do wars still happen between planets?" asked an elderly man named Wanho. "How do peaceful species protect themselves if they meet aggressive ones?" The questions showed a sophisticated understanding of galactic politics. These colonists clearly thought deeply about complex issues, even though they had been isolated for centuries. As Veltar returned to his shuttle that evening, he felt impressed by what he had seen. The humans were clearly intelligent, organized, and peaceful. They had built a successful society that took care of all its members. Still, small details bothered him. The colony's infrastructure seemed designed for a much larger population. Their manufacturing capabilities were more advanced than needed for simple farming, and everyone he met seemed to have detailed knowledge about subjects that isolated colonists shouldn't know much about. But these were probably just signs of a thoughtful people who planned carefully for the future. Tomorrow he would complete his inspection and begin preparing his recommendation for the Galactic Council. The humans of Bekdu Prime would make valuable members of the galactic community. On the third day of his visit, Captain Veltar asked to see the original crash site where the human colony ship had landed 2 centuries ago. Administrator Jinho seemed hesitant at first, then agreed to take him there. "It's quite far from the city," Jinho explained as they traveled in a ground vehicle. "We've left it mostly untouched as a memorial to our ancestors." The journey took them through rolling hills covered with more of the geometric farming patterns. Veltar noticed that even here, far from the main settlement, the land showed signs of careful planning and organization. The crash site was in a valley surrounded by low mountains. The remains of a large starship lay partially buried in the ground, its metal hull still visible after 200 years. But what surprised Veltar was how well preserved everything was. "Your people have maintained this site carefully," he observed. A man named Minho met them at the site. He introduced himself as the colony's librarian and historical researcher. He was responsible for preserving artifacts and records from the original settlement. "We believe it's important to remember where we came from," Minho said. "This ship carried our ancestors to their new home. We owe them our respect." As they explored the wreckage, Veltar's archaeological training helped him understand what he was seeing. This had not been an ordinary colony ship. The hull showed signs of weapon damage. Sections of the ship had been reinforced with military-grade armor. Emergency repairs had been made during flight. "This ship was damaged in battle," Veltar said, examining burn marks on the metal. Minho nodded solemnly. "Yes, our ancestors faced great dangers during their journey. They were fleeing from something terrible." Inside the ship's remains, Minho showed them to what had once been the command center. Ancient computer systems still held data, preserved by the dry climate and careful maintenance. With Minho's help, Veltar accessed the ship's historical records. What he read made his blood run cold. The New Soul had not been a normal colony ship. It was an evacuation vessel carrying military personnel, weapons experts, and strategic planners. The records told of a massive war that had raged across the galaxy 2 centuries ago. An aggressive species called the hegemony had begun systematically destroying what they considered inferior races. They used overwhelming military force to conquer planets, then eliminated the native populations. Dozens of civilizations had already fallen. "We had no idea this happened," Veltar whispered as he read reports of entire worlds being destroyed. "Most species don't," Minho replied quietly. "The few survivors scattered to hidden places. Some forgot their past. Others, like us, remembered. The records showed that humanity had been one of the few species to fight back effectively against the hegemony. Human military tactics and technology had given the aliens trouble, but even so, humanity was losing the war. The New Soul was part of a desperate plan. Several ships had been sent to remote, unmapped systems to establish hidden bases. If the war was lost, these bases would survive to continue the fight. Your people have been preparing for war for 200 years, Veltar realized. We've been preparing for the hegemony's return, Minho corrected. Because they will return. Species like that don't simply stop conquering. As they left the crash site, Minho took them to meet other colonists who worked in what he called specialized areas. These people had been maintaining and developing the original mission's goals. Yuna was introduced as the colony's chief medical officer. But when she spoke, it became clear her knowledge went far beyond simple health care. She had spent decades studying the biology of different alien species, developing ways to counter biological weapons and understand physiological weaknesses. We've analyzed every piece of data we could gather about galactic species, Yuna explained. Not to harm anyone, but to understand how to protect ourselves and others if the need arises. Kiwan worked in what was officially called mining operations. In reality, he managed the extraction and stockpiling of rare metals and elements needed for advanced weapons and defensive systems. We've been building reserves for 2 centuries, Kiwan said as he showed them underground storage facilities, carved into the mountains. Everything needed to equip an army or defend a planet. The storage areas were vast, filled with carefully organized materials. Metal alloys for armor and weapons, rare elements for energy systems, chemical compounds for explosives and propellants. Everything was labeled, cataloged, and maintained in perfect condition. This is enough material to supply a major military force, Veltar observed. That's the idea, Kiwan replied. We've been preparing to help anyone willing to stand against the hegemony when they return. As the day continued, Veltar met more colonists whose real roles became clear. The teachers were actually military trainers. The farmers were tactical specialists who used agriculture as cover for defensive planning. The artists created detailed models and plans for weapons and fortifications. The most shocking revelation came when they met with a group of young adults who had been introduced earlier as students. Their leader was a woman named Nari, who had been described as studying art and culture. Show them what we really study, Minho suggested. Nari led them to a training facility hidden beneath what appeared to be a cultural center. Inside, young people practiced with weapons, studied battle tactics, and trained in combat techniques. They moved with precision and skill that showed years of dedicated practice. Every person on this planet learns to fight, Nari explained. Not because we want to, but because we must be ready. When the hegemony returns, we won't be helpless victims. The training facility contained equipment and weapons that were more advanced than anything the current galaxy used. Veltar recognized some designs from ancient military records, but others were completely new. You've been developing new technology, he said. We've had 200 years to improve on what our ancestors brought, Nari replied. We've studied every known form of combat, every type of weapon, every defensive strategy. We've created things the galaxy has never seen. As evening approached, Veltar felt overwhelmed by what he had learned. The peaceful farming colony was actually a military fortress disguised as a simple settlement. Every person he had met was both a civilian and a soldier. Every building and system had a hidden military purpose. Why show me this? He asked Jinho as they returned to the city. You could have kept up the deception. Jinho was quiet for a long moment. Because we've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know about the current state of the galaxy. All those peaceful species, all those worlds without real defenses. When the hegemony returns, you'll all be slaughtered unless someone is prepared to help. You think they'll really come back? We know they will. The hegemony doesn't just disappear. They expand, conquer, and destroy. Right now, they're probably rebuilding their forces in some distant part of the galaxy. When they're ready, they'll return to finish what they started. That night, Veltar couldn't sleep. Everything he thought he knew about the galaxy had changed. The peaceful civilization he represented existed only because the hegemony had been absent for 2 centuries. When they returned, all the diplomatic protocols and peaceful negotiations in the universe wouldn't matter. But maybe, just maybe, a small group of humans who had spent 200 years preparing for war could make the difference between survival and extinction for every peaceful species in the galaxy. The question was, would the galaxy listen when they tried to warn everyone what was coming? Captain Veltar could not hide his feelings anymore. During breakfast with Administrator Jinho, he decided to speak directly about what he had discovered. "You lied to us," Veltar said, setting down his cup. "This isn't a peaceful farming colony. You're a military base disguised as a settlement." Jinho remained calm as he finished his meal. "We didn't lie, Captain. We simply didn't tell you everything immediately. Would you have reacted the same way if we had greeted your ship with weapons powered and shields raised?" "That's not the point. The Galactic Council expects honest communication from potential members." "And we will be completely honest," Jinho replied. "But first, we needed to understand what kind of people you are. Are you allies who would help defend innocent worlds? Are you enemies who might share our location with hostile forces? Or are you simply naive beings who don't understand the real dangers in this galaxy?" Veltar felt insulted. "We represent dozens of peaceful civilizations. We've maintained galactic peace for over a century." "Yes, but what happens when that peace is challenged by someone who doesn't want to negotiate?" Jinho asked. "What happens when you meet enemies who see your peaceful nature as weakness to be exploited?" Before Veltar could answer, Jinho stood up. "Today is our seasonal festival. Would you and your team like to observe our cultural celebrations? It might help you understand who we really are." Still frustrated but curious, Veltar agreed. He gathered his diplomatic team and followed Jinho toward the city center. Along the way, they met other humans who were preparing for the day's events. The festival began in the main square where hundreds of colonists had gathered. At first, it looked like any normal cultural celebration. People wore colorful clothes. Children played games, and vendors sold food and crafts. But Veltar noticed that the games children played involved precise movements and teamwork exercises. The dances adults performed required perfect timing and coordination. The decorations around the square had geometric patterns that looked more like strategic diagrams. "Our festivals celebrate our community and our preparedness," explained a woman named Nari, who had been introduced as an artist. "We honor both our peaceful life and our readiness to protect it." As the morning progressed, the activities became more obviously military in nature. What started as children's games evolved into complex tactical exercises. Young people worked together to solve problems that clearly involved combat scenarios and strategic thinking. At noon, a man named Dong Yun stepped onto a platform in the center of the square. He was introduced as the festival coordinator, but when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a military commander. "Citizens of Baekdu Prime," he announced. "Today we demonstrate our capabilities to our honored guests. Let them see what 200 years of preparation has accomplished." What happened next shocked Veltar completely. At Dong Yun's signal, the entire colony transformed in minutes. The decorative banners dropped away to reveal communication equipment. The festival stages converted into command centers. The vendor stalls opened to show weapons and military supplies. People changed from colorful festival clothes into military uniforms with practiced efficiency. The peaceful farmers and teachers and artists disappeared. In their place stood soldiers, technicians, and officers who moved with precision and purpose. Even the children took positions at communication posts and monitoring stations. "This is our true nature," Jinho said as he watched Veltar's amazed expression. "We are peaceful people who are always ready for war." Across the city, more changes were happening. The grain silos opened to reveal missile launchers that rose toward the sky. The irrigation channels showed their real purpose as defensive trenches with concealed weapons positions. Buildings shifted and rearranged themselves. To create fortified strongpoints, underground, hidden systems came online. Power generators that had been disguised as agricultural equipment began supplying energy to defensive shields. Communication arrays emerged from beneath farming areas to scan the space around the planet. "Your entire colony is a military base," Veltar whispered. "Our entire colony is a community that can defend itself," Jinho corrected. "Every person here lives a normal life, but every person is also trained to fight. Every building serves civilian purposes, but every building can also serve military ones." In the harbor area, the water began to move strangely. What Veltar had thought were underwater farming areas turned out to be camouflaged launch bays. Warships rose from beneath the surface, sleek and deadly vessels that looked unlike anything in current galactic fleets. "We've spent 2 centuries developing technology," explained a young man named Seokjin, who commanded a squadron of fighter pilots. "Our ships use stealth systems that make them nearly invisible. Our weapons can penetrate any known defense. Our defensive systems can protect against attacks that would destroy normal planets." Veltar watched as fighter craft launched from hidden bases throughout the colony. They moved with incredible speed and agility, performing maneuvers that seemed impossible. Their weapon systems charged with energy signatures that his ship's sensors couldn't fully analyze. "How many ships do you have?" he asked. "Enough," Seokjin replied with a slight smile. "We've been building steadily for 2 centuries. Every generation adds to our fleet." The demonstration continued for hours. Infantry units showed their advanced armor and weapons. Artillery systems revealed their incredible range and accuracy. Defensive installations proved they could withstand massive attacks. But what impressed Veltar most was the coordination. Thousands of people worked together like parts of a single organism. Orders were given and followed instantly. Resources were moved and allocated with perfect efficiency. The entire colony operated like a military unit that had been training together for decades. "This level of organization is remarkable," Veltar admitted to Jinho. "Your people work together better than most military forces I've seen." "Because we're not just a military force," Jinho explained. "We're a community. These people aren't just soldiers following orders. They're neighbors protecting their families, friends defending their homes, parents ensuring their children have a future." As the demonstration wound down, systems began returning to their peaceful configurations. Weapons disappeared back into hiding. Military uniforms were replaced by civilian clothes. The colony looked like a normal settlement again. But Veltar would never see it the same way. Now he knew that every friendly farmer could become a deadly soldier in minutes. Every peaceful building could transform into a fortress. Every community gathering could become a military operation. "Why show us this?" he asked as they walked back toward the city center. "You've revealed your greatest secrets." "Because we need allies, not subjects," Jinho replied. "The hegemony is coming back. When they do, peaceful species will need protectors. But we can't protect everyone by ourselves. We need other civilizations to be prepared, to be trained, to be ready." "You want to militarize the galaxy." "We want to give the galaxy a chance to survive," Jinho corrected. "Right now, your peaceful species are sheep waiting for wolves. We can teach you to become sheepdogs, still peaceful, but capable of fighting when necessary." That evening, as Veltar prepared his report for the Galactic Council, he faced an impossible decision. Should he recommend that Bekdu Prime be welcomed into the galactic community? They were clearly peaceful people who wanted to protect others. But they were also the most militarily advanced civilization he had ever encountered. More importantly, were they right about the hegemony? Was the galaxy's long peace about to end? And if so, were these humans the galaxy's best hope for survival? The answers to those questions would determine the fate of every peaceful world in known space. 3 days after the festival demonstration, everything changed. Captain Veltar was reviewing his notes in the guest quarters when urgent alarms began sounding throughout the colony. Within minutes, Administrator Jinho arrived at his door. "Captain, we need to speak immediately," Jinho said, his calm demeanor replaced by intense focus. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected something you need to see." They hurried to what Veltar had thought was the colony's communication center. But as they entered the building, he realized it was actually a sophisticated military command facility. Dozens of technicians worked at advanced monitoring systems that scanned far beyond the local star system. A man named Jihoon approached them. He had been introduced as a communications officer, but now Veltar could see he was actually the head of intelligence operations. "Captain, we've been tracking unusual energy signatures moving toward the Galactic Rim," Jihoon reported. "The patterns match historical records of hegemony fleet movements." On the main display screen, Jihoon showed readings from monitoring stations hidden throughout the outer galaxy. The data painted a disturbing picture. Massive ships were moving in coordinated formations, heading directly toward inhabited systems. "How long have you been monitoring these areas?" Veltar asked. "Since we arrived here 2 centuries ago," Jihoon replied. "We've maintained hidden sensors in dozens of systems, watching for signs of hegemony activity. For most of that time, we detected nothing. But 6 months ago, that changed." The screen showed a timeline of recent detections. First, energy signatures appeared in the galactic outer rim. Then, scout ships began probing empty systems. Most recently, large fleets had begun moving toward areas where peaceful civilizations lived. "They're conducting reconnaissance," Jihoon explained. "Mapping current defenses, cataloging inhabited worlds, identifying which species pose threats, and which can be easily conquered." Veltar felt cold fear spreading through his body. "How long before they reach inhabited systems?" "Based on their current speed and direction, the first attacks will begin within 6 months, Jihoon said grimly. "They're targeting the most defenseless worlds first, probably to test their weapons and gather resources before facing any serious resistance." Jinho activated another display that showed the current locations of major galactic civilizations. Red markers indicated where hegemony forces were headed. Most of the peaceful worlds lay directly in their path. "Your home system is one of their primary targets," Jinho told Veltar. "The Catherian worlds have large populations, advanced infrastructure, and no significant military defenses. You're exactly what they're looking for." This was Veltar's worst nightmare. His people had built their civilization around peace, diplomacy, and cooperation. They had no weapons capable of fighting a space war. Their ships were designed for exploration and trade, not combat. "We need to warn the Galactic Council immediately," Veltar said. "We've already tried," Jinho replied sadly. "We've been sending warning messages to major civilizations for months. Most ignore them completely. Those who respond think we're either mistaken or trying to create panic for our own purposes." On another screen, Jihoon showed copies of messages they had sent to various governments and organizations. The responses were dismissive, bureaucratic, or simply absent. "The Altarian Republic thinks we're a military cult trying to start unnecessary conflicts," Jihoon reported. "The Centauri Federation believes we're exaggerating minor pirate activity. The Galactic Trade Council considers our warnings economically motivated." "Why won't they listen?" Veltar asked. "Because they can't imagine what's coming," said a new voice. A woman named Yunbi entered the command center. She had been introduced as an environmental scientist, but Veltar now realized she was a strategic analyst. "Captain, your people have enjoyed peace for over a century," Yunbi explained. "You've built societies based on the assumption that conflicts can be resolved through negotiation. The idea of an enemy that simply wants to destroy you is beyond your experience." She activated a display showing historical records from the last hegemony war. Images of destroyed worlds, burning cities, and empty star systems filled the screen. The hegemony doesn't negotiate. They don't want territory or resources or political control. They want to eliminate what they consider inferior life forms. They see peaceful species as flawed, weak, and unworthy of existence. Veltar studied the historical data. Entire civilizations had been wiped out completely. Planets had been stripped of all life. Some worlds had been destroyed entirely, turned into lifeless rocks floating in space. But surely some species must have survived by surrendering or cooperating, he suggested. No, Yunbi said simply. Surrender means death. Cooperation means death. Hiding means death. The only species that survived were those that fought back successfully or escaped to hidden locations. She showed him more records. Species that had tried to negotiate were destroyed first. Worlds that offered tribute or alliance were eliminated without consideration. Only military resistance had any effect at all. This is why we've been preparing, Jinho said. Not because we enjoy war, but because it's the only way to survive what's coming. They spent the next several hours reviewing intelligence about hegemony capabilities. The enemy ships were massive, heavily armed, and protected by defensive systems that could withstand tremendous damage. Their weapons could destroy planets from orbit. Their armies used tactics designed for complete extermination rather than conquest. But the intelligence also revealed weaknesses. Hegemony forces relied on overwhelming superiority rather than tactical flexibility. Their commanders expected easy victories and became less effective when faced with serious resistance. Their technology was powerful, but not as advanced as what the humans had developed during 2 centuries of preparation. We think we can fight them, said a man named Wanho, who managed the colony's transportation systems. Our ships are smaller, but faster and more maneuverable. Our weapons are more precise. Our defensive systems are designed specifically to counter their attack methods. Veltar learned that the humans had been developing countermeasures for every known hegemony weapon and tactic. They had created new forms of armor that could resist hegemony energy weapons. They had designed shields that could deflect the enemy's most powerful attacks. They had built weapons that could penetrate hegemony defenses. But we can't defend the entire galaxy by ourselves, Jinho explained. We have enough ships and weapons to protect a few worlds, maybe to fight some major battles. But there are hundreds of inhabited systems out there. We need help. The solution they proposed was both simple and revolutionary. Bekdu Prime would become a training center for galactic defense. Human military experts would teach other species how to fight. Human engineers would share defensive technologies. Human strategists would help plan coordinated resistance. We're not asking other civilizations to become warriors, Yunbi explained. We're asking them to become survivors. Learn enough about fighting to protect yourselves. Build enough defenses to make attacking you costly. Work together so the hegemony can't destroy you one world at a time. But this would require the galactic community to abandon many of their most fundamental beliefs. Peaceful species would need to build weapons. Diplomatic civilizations would need to prepare for war. Cooperative societies would need to accept that some enemies could not be reasoned with. Will your people accept this? Jinho asked Veltar. Will they listen to warnings and take action, even if it means changing everything they believe about how the galaxy works? Veltar thought about his own people. The Catherians valued harmony, understanding, and peaceful coexistence above all else. The idea of preparing for war would horrify most of them. Many would refuse to believe the threat was real until hegemony ships appeared in their skies. But some would listen. Some would understand that their peaceful way of life could only continue if they were willing to defend it, and maybe, with human help, that would be enough. I'll take your evidence to the Galactic Council, Veltar promised. I'll make them understand what's coming, and I'll ask them to send representatives here to learn what you can teach us. As he prepared to leave Bekdu Prime, Veltar realized that his mission had changed completely. He had come here to evaluate a potential new member for the galactic community. Instead, he was returning with news that might determine whether the galactic community would continue to exist at all. 2 months after Captain Veltar returned to the Galactic Council with his warnings, the first hegemony scouts attacked an Outer Rim trading post. The attack lasted only minutes, but it left no survivors and no doubt about what was coming. Within days, ships from across the galaxy began arriving at Bekdu Prime. The peaceful colony that had hidden its true nature for 2 centuries suddenly became the most important world in known space. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a secret military base disguised as a farming settlement became the headquarters of a desperate alliance. Representatives from dozens of species came to learn what the humans could teach them about survival. Captain Veltar returned as the official Kytherian representative. He found the colony barely recognizable. Temporary buildings housed thousands of alien visitors. Training facilities that had been hidden underground were now expanded and operating around the clock. The peaceful farms had been converted into staging areas for the largest military buildup in galactic history. Administrator Jinho met Veltar at the landing site, but he was no longer just the leader of a small colony. He had become the coordinator of an alliance that included over 50 different species. "Welcome back, Captain," Jinho said, as they shook hands. "I wish our reunion could be under better circumstances." Around them, the activity was incredible. Kytherian diplomats worked with human strategists to plan defensive operations. Altarian engineers studied human weapons technology to adapt it for their ships. Centauri pilots practiced combat maneuvers with human flight instructors. "How many species have joined the alliance?" Veltar asked. 47 so far, Jinho replied. "More arrive every day. Some come because they believe the threat is real, others come because they've already lost outer colonies to hegemony attacks." As they walked through the expanded facilities, Veltar saw the massive effort required to prepare so many different species for war. Each alien race had different capabilities, different technologies, and different ways of thinking about conflict. A man named Chanwu had become the chief instructor for alien species. He had spent decades studying different forms of warfare, but now he was learning to teach beings with completely different biologies and cultures. "The biggest challenge isn't teaching them to fight," Chanwu explained as they visited a training area where Kytherian officers practiced tactical planning. "It's teaching them to think like soldiers when they've spent centuries thinking like diplomats." Some species adapted quickly to military thinking. The reptilian Vaxari had aggressive instincts that translated well to combat tactics. The insect-like hivelings already understood coordinated group activities that worked well for military operations. Others struggled with concepts that contradicted their fundamental nature. The energy-based Luminari had difficulty understanding physical combat. The plant-like Verdians moved too slowly for most tactical maneuvers, but the humans found ways to work with every species. They identified each race's natural strengths and designed roles that used those abilities effectively. They created new technologies that accommodated different biologies. They developed training programs that respected different cultural values, while still teaching necessary skills. "We're not trying to turn everyone into human soldiers," explained a woman named Su Yung, who worked as an agricultural advisor but was actually a specialist in defensive planning. "We're trying to help each species become the best defenders they can be." For species that couldn't fight directly, the humans found other crucial roles. The ethereals, who existed partly in subspace, became excellent scouts and communication specialists. The crystalline resonance could process and coordinate vast amounts of tactical data. The gaseous nebulans could disperse through enemy formations. To gather intelligence, the technology sharing was just as important as the training. Human engineers worked day and night to adapt their advanced weapons and defensive systems for different species, ships, and installations. A young man named Jae-hyun had taken over many of Jinho's administrative duties as the alliance grew. He coordinated the distribution of new technologies and ensured that every member species received equipment suited to their capabilities. "We're sharing everything," Jae-hyun explained, as he showed Veltar through manufacturing facilities that had expanded far beyond the original colony. Weapon designs, defensive technologies, tactical databases, everything we've developed over 2 centuries. The weapons were impressive. Energy cannons that could penetrate hegemony armor, missile systems that could track targets through hyperspace, defensive shields that could protect entire planets from orbital bombardment. But the most important innovations were strategic. The humans had developed new approaches to space combat that used the galaxy's diversity as a strength rather than a weakness. Mixed species fleets combined different capabilities in ways that confused and overwhelmed enemy forces. "The hegemony expects to fight one species at a time," explained a veteran pilot named Seok Jin. "They're prepared for human tactics, or Catherian diplomacy, or Altarian technology. They're not prepared for coordinated attacks that use all of these approaches simultaneously." The first major test came when hegemony forces attacked the Centauri system. Instead of each species defending its own territory separately, the Alliance responded as a unified force. Catherian ships provided long-range sensors and coordination. Human vessels delivered precision strikes against enemy weak points. Altarian fighters provided fast-moving support. Vaxari assault ships engaged in close combat. The combined fleet fought with a coordination and effectiveness that surprised everyone. The battle was not easy. Hegemony forces were powerful and determined, but for the first time in centuries, they faced serious resistance from multiple species working together. The enemy fleet was forced to retreat after suffering significant losses. "We won," Veltar said in amazement as he watched the battle reports. "We survived," Jinho corrected. "That was just their advance force. The real test is still coming. Intelligence." Reports showed that the hegemony main fleet was much larger than the forces that had attacked Centauri, but they also showed that the enemy was adapting their tactics to account for the unexpected resistance they had encountered. "They're taking us seriously now," said Intelligence Chief Jahoon. "They're bringing their full military strength to bear, but they're also being more cautious, which gives us opportunities." The alliance continued to grow. More species joined as word spread about the successful defense of Centauri. New technologies were developed and shared. Training programs expanded to handle larger numbers of recruits. Most importantly, the different species began working together in ways that went beyond simple military cooperation. They shared knowledge, resources, and ideas. They learned from each other's strengths and helped overcome each other's weaknesses. "This is what we hoped for," Jinho told Veltar as they watched a mixed group of aliens and humans working together to plan defensive strategies. Not just an alliance for war, but a foundation for a better galaxy. The humans had achieved something remarkable. They had taken their 2 centuries of preparation for war and used it to teach others how to preserve peace. They had turned their isolation into a gift that they could share with the entire galaxy. But the greatest test was still ahead. Hegemony main forces were approaching inhabited systems. The Alliance would face its ultimate challenge in the coming months. As Veltar prepared for the battles ahead, he thought about how much had changed since his first visit to Bekdu Prime. He had come looking for a simple farming colony and found a fortress. He had expected to evaluate potential allies and instead discovered teachers who could save the galaxy. The humans had been preparing for war for 200 years. Now they were teaching everyone else how to win it. In the end, the lost colony had not been lost at all. They had been exactly where they needed to be, when they needed to be there, ready to do what had to be done. And because of their preparation, the galaxy would survive.